Special thanks once again to Iconic Autos in Berkshire for providing me yet again with another very nice Mercedes, just like in my last review for the CL600 V12. Of course, check out that review if you haven't already, and incidentally, you can check out their website, including their current stock, by clicking the link right below this video in the description. The very first question which Iconic Autos asked me when I asked them if I could borrow their C32 AMG for a review was actually a very pertinent question. And funnily enough, the question itself is the answer. Why a C32? They wanted to know why would I, as a reviewer, single out that car, especially when you've got stuff like C55s, C63s, even the slightly older C43 AMG, all of which have the commonality of the big AMG V8. It's kind of what they're known for. This is not a V8, it's a V6. So why this one? Why did I single out this car? Well, as I said, the question itself is the entire reason. Now, for those who are completely new to the channel, I think it's important to mention that my passions for cars really hone in on stuff like this. I run an entire series on this channel with well over 100 episodes called Unsung Heroes, and the whole point of that series is to shine the spotlight on cars that get forgotten or undervalued that are actually really cool or interesting. This has shades of that kind of vehicle. The C32 is definitely a unicorn of the AMG line, because as I said, most of the others have those bigger V8s. In fact, this is one of the very rare occasions, and one of the first occasions, to see an AMG V6 at all, and yet the amount of effort that they put into it, and crucially, the amount of performance which came out of this car is shockingly good. Do not be fooled by the fact that it's kind of a sleeper, and certainly don't be fooled by the boot on the back. In sedan and estate forms, this is a formidable performance car. Now, that other Mercedes that I reviewed before is the more flamboyant option, the CL600 with a big naturally aspirated V12, great 0 to 60 for what it is. It's everything you expect from a Mercedes. This is nothing you expect from a Mercedes. And the simplest way to describe the difference between these two cars that I reviewed back to back is that the CL is everything you expect a Mercedes to be. The C32 is a high-performance estate that happens to have a Mercedes badge. And to me that's a great thing, because it means it can appeal to people who otherwise would never be interested in a Mercedes, or necessarily an AMG. So what kind of people should look into this car? Well, if you're looking at this video, chances are you have some interest in the vehicle at least, but I would actually say that this car is a perfect consideration, a shortlist vehicle, if you will. If you're in the market and you've got maybe a smaller family, you don't have to, but possibly a smaller family, maybe a pet of some kind, you commute to work, but you also want to have some fun, you want to use your performance car as much as possible, this is the kind of car for you. I would actually say it is a more than capable alternative to something more obvious in Britain, like a Ford Mondeo ST of the time, or a Vauxhall Vectra VXR, or even what this car was technically the actual rival for, the BMW M3. But in a similar way to how the C63 rivaled the E92 M3, the crucial difference was the extra doors, and that extra practicality can make all the difference for a daily driver, especially when it's this one, with the estate giving you even more practicality. Now, to get some of the less impressive stuff out of the way first, the key thing that you need to know is the fuel economy is not great. You're looking at about maybe 24-25 to the gallon at best. So for a V6, it's pretty thirsty, but don't let that turn you off yet, because wait until I tell you what the performance is. You're probably expecting it to be quick, but trust me, you do not know how quick this is, and just wait until I tell you. It's got a 3.2 litre V6, of course built by AMG. It's supercharged, twin screw, 14.5 psi of boost. It's an automatic, which will immediately put a lot of people off, a 5-speed auto, but stay with me, I still haven't told you the 0 to 60 time or the quarter mile yet, and crucially, the gearbox gives you options that are not flappy paddle related, because this car can do 0 to 60 in 5 seconds. In fact, some quote 4.9. That is more than close enough to an M3 to worry it, especially from, let me remind you again, a wagon. 4 doors, 5 seats, and space for a Labrador. 5 seconds to 60. That is pretty phenomenal. Now, it's especially phenomenal not only when you consider that it doesn't have the V8 that you would typically expect, but in actual fact, that V6 engine still puts out 350 horsepower and 330 pound-feet of torque. That means that this car, for only being a 3.2 V6, has barely 20 horsepower less than the C55 does. That's a 5.4 litre V8, and it's hardly that much more power. Plus, as you could hear from the start of the video, and even within this video at certain key points as well, it doesn't exactly sound bad either. That 6-cylinder sounds very nice. It doesn't rumble like a V8, but it has a very nice bark, and that kind of 6-cylinder sound tends to be a pretty popular thing in England. We do like a nice 6-cylinder over here, both homegrown and foreign, and this I think is a prime example. An AMG V6 is just an inherently unicorn status thing, regardless of what car it's put into. The fact that it's as practical and as spacious as this one, I think is just a bonus. Now, as far as the handling, the road presence, the comfort, well, the handling is nothing short of fantastic. You don't feel the length of the car in the slightest, so don't worry about that. It's not particularly wide or tall, so manoeuvring on British roads is easy as anything. In fact, it feels like a borderline hot hatch sometimes, and that to me is one of the most important things for the UK market as well. In the UK, we love underdog performance cars, like a 2 to 3 litre with 200 to 300 horsepower, usually front wheel drive with a nice manual, something like a hot hatch, like a Ford Focus RS, a Mitsubishi Evo, a Subaru WRX, that kind of thing. This is a prime rival for those cars, but nobody thinks of it as being that. Because one of the biggest advantages, and one of the spiciest advantages that the C32 has, is that unlike most of our traditional British cars, it's not front-wheel drive, and unlike the Japanese options, it's not all-wheel drive. This is one of the very, very few options within that kind of category that is rear-wheel drive. Rear-wheel drive with, as I said, an automatic, but here's the thing, an automatic which you can put into kind of a semi-auto mode, where you put it down into drive and then you can click it left or right to choose when you want to change gear. So you still have control over the gears when you want to have more fun. And fun, this car definitely is. It flies through corners, it's got a tremendous amount of grip for what it is, partially due to the weight, which isn't too high, not too low, and it definitely doesn't feel heavy. If I had to guess the weight of this car, I would probably say somewhere in the region of 1,300 kilos. So basically like a hot hatch, in other words. And that, in my opinion, is perfect placement for this car. Now, as far as reliability, long-term issues which you can have, of course it's not a big V12 or even a V8, so finding parts and the cost of parts shouldn't be too crazy. Again, I'm not the owner of the car, so I can't speak to the ongoing reliability or the costs, so do more research there if you need to. But what I can say is that some of the more common issues which you'll find tend to be to do with the intercooler, the supercharger clutch, and some rust issues occasionally as well. So be sure to look out for those things on certain cars. This one, for instance, has had a few things done to it, mostly cosmetic, but it's still fairly understated, it's still a sleeper, and one of the easiest ways to tell the difference between the C32 and the C55 visually, I mean, of course the audio makes it obvious, but visually alone, if you look at the back end, of course, the V6 has a twin exhaust, the V8 has 4. It's a very easy way of seeing the difference between the two. Now, having a fuel economy of in the mid-20s to the gallon is probably the biggest notable drawback of the car, I think. Everything else is very impressive. It is speed limited, incidentally, to 155. As I said, the 0 to 60 is about 5 seconds, which is phenomenal. Rear-wheel drive, semi-automatic, tons of space, great trunk space, not overly large, easy to park. I mean, the list really does go on. It's also, and this is a key thing that impresses me about the car, and again, harkens back to why I wanted to review it in the first place, it's not the obvious choice. The C32 is an underdog. It's not an appreciated car. It's not even an obvious AMG, let alone an obvious performance car in general, and I believe it definitely deserves more love. Now, you will find the Estate slightly harder to find. You tend to see a few more of the sedans rather than the wagons, but depending on which one you want, try to look for one. If you are interested, try to test drive it, because I think you will love it. The handling gives so much to work with, it's got so much character, it's a very playful car, and the only thing that I would say I slightly disliked about the vehicle in practice, because the fuel economy is more of an abstract thing, was actually the fact that the space is a little bit width cramped. The headroom, ironically, is really good, better than the CL class, shockingly. The legroom's pretty good, width-wise not so much, because it's not an overly wide car. But again, most people aren't going to have that issue. That is one of the hazards of being a bigger guy, and I know that. You can kind of see in the video, I look a little bit oversized inside the car, so again, something to bear in mind. And of course, I cannot close out the video without, as promised, mentioning that quarter-mile time. The 0 to 60, as I said, is 5 seconds, but this car can do a quarter in about 13. For an affordable estate car, I'd say that's pretty good. It's not like it has all-wheel drive launch on its side either, so if you find a nice example without crazy high mileage, you're currently looking in the UK at least for something like 5 or 6 grand, occasionally a little bit higher. The vast majority of them are in silver, which is no surprise for a Mercedes Chrysler vehicle of the time. So again, they can have some reliability issues, but at the same time, it's not as high risk, in fact nowhere near as high risk as something like a cheap Mercedes V12, and I would say not as high risk as a V8 potentially either. But if you are in the market for one, the V8 is still in contention. So of course don't rule that car out, just don't overlook this one. It's a very different kind of animal. Give the car its due, give it a try if you can, and if you're in the market, try and drive it. I don't think you'll be disappointed. But overall, that's it for my thoughts on this car. Of course, if you are new to the channel, be sure to check out my other reviews. I've covered Maseratis, the other Mercedes, as I said, a couple of others too, both new and used cars, and there are most definitely more to come as well. So click on screen to see those, and until next time, I'll see you then. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.